What's up, everyone? It's Isaac Smolden, the production manager here at My House. Just wanted to give you a heads up that today's episode of Redemption is part one of a two-part series with our guest, Blaze Bell. Staci, Julia, and myself, we were so excited to have Blaze on as a podcast guest for Redemption. I think all three of us have been trying for so long to have her on the show, and it was really great to take just about an hour talk in part one about her background, her story, her healing journey, and then in part two, more about what she's doing today to help survivors in this field. A warning that today's episode will discuss sensitive content, so listener and viewer discretion is advised. But without any further ado, let's get into part one of our two-part series with Blaze on the Redemption Podcast.
Warning. Some content discussed in this podcast can be triggering to survivors of sexual assault and difficult to hear. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Redemption Podcast with your hosts, Staci
and Julia.
Welcome to Redemption. This is Season 2, Episode 9. Today, our guest is the amazing Blaze Bell. Before we get into talking to Blaze, though, I want to reach over to Isaac and ask Isaac, does he have any housekeeping today?
Not a lot going on. Just a reminder that this is the last two episodes of Season 2 of Redemption. We have a couple other podcasts that have gone out recently, including My House podcast last week, talking about the upcoming YRBS survey and why that is so important to our organization. And Diagnonsense also had an episode drop this Wednesday, kind of continuing our conversation from the previous week. So if you've only listened to the first part of that, definitely go ahead and check out part 2 of that super hypothetical conversation that we were having.
Great. Thank you. Blaze Bell. Oh, she's an amazing woman. I had the honor of meeting Blaze back at a governor's press conference about a year ago, I think it was. And I'm just so excited. I've been wanting to have her on here for over a year, so it's finally happened. So a little bit about Blaze Bell. Blaze has transformed her pain into purpose. She pulls on her personal story of overcoming trauma and addiction as she provides inspiration, perspective, shifts, healing tools, and a way to move out of victimhood and to be in the empowered creators we came here to be. Some of Blaze's notable achievements: she is the top 40 under 40 honoree of 2022. She is the commissioner on the Alaska Criminal Justice Commission for 2022. She is the vice chair on the Council of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. She's also with Victims for Justice. She is the board president. And also she is the recipient of the 2019 First Lady Volunteer of Alaska Award. I love, like on her website, Blaze, what you say: I am free, courageous, and I know how to return to joy. That's such a powerful, powerful statement. So Blaze, welcome to Redemption Podcast.
Thank you. Wow, you make me sound so cool.
You are so cool.
You just follow me around. I can just have a live, hype woman all the time.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Julia, Staci. I'm so happy to finally connect and that we found a time to hang out for a bit. This is great.
I know. So Blaze, I want to get started because there's some people probably here in our audience who don't know who Blaze Bell is.
Including myself.
Yeah.
I've met Blaze at 2 fashion show events that are just completely outside of what we do here at My House. And at those events, there's crazy. There's a lot of things going on, people everywhere. And so we really haven't had any time to connect. And I feel like a lot of people know Blaze's story just because she's so out in the community and, does a lot of stuff for recovery and everything, like her whole mission. But I don't know anything about you. So I don't know your full story. So I'm excited for today.
Good. Yeah. Awesome. And what's interesting is over the years, I have gained so many more boundaries around when and where to tell my story and how to tell it. And, and I think that's just important for people out there who have a story to share, but are afraid to, or have times where you feel like I feel pressured to sometimes, like this is a responsibility and I need to save all the people and what can I do? And there are times when it's like, no, actually I need to rest, or
Yeah.
I don't have to be vulnerable and uncomfortable every day. I can really create some boundaries for my own story. And so I just to say that to people who are trying to figure that part out too.
I love that so much. I needed to hear that one too. That's beautiful. And a lot of us need that, especially us who do this. Sometimes we feel compelled to tell the story. And sometimes, like you said, I just need to rest. I just can't live it right now. I need to rest and be who I am right now. And yeah, thank you for that.
A lot of the times we learn that lesson the hard way.
Yeah.
I have.
Absolutely.
I think we all have. That's how we learn. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
So Blaze, tell us a little bit about what you do, and if you want to start, younger, or like, well, were you born in Alaska?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been, born and raised here in Anchorage, and I've traveled, but I haven't really fully lived anywhere else.
Okay.
Though I hope to live close to a beach at some point in my life.
Me too.
As I look at the snow just coming down really hard right now. But I was born and raised here, and a lot of my life today and sort of my mission in this lifetime is around helping survivors of sexual assault and just sharing what's helped me heal from addiction and my own personal challenges. And I think a lot of us can offer that to the world in whatever way feels comfortable. But what we know so well is what we've gone through. And
Right.
I think there's just nothing more powerful than having a mentor who's experienced something similar to what you've experienced versus like someone who's read about it in a book, which they can be lovely too.
Right.
But it's different,
It is.
So do you want me to just dive in?
Yeah, dive in, Blaze, please.
Okay. So my childhood was okay. My father had bipolar and really turned to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate that. And so he really was not in my life at all. And it's not so much until today that I'm starting to actually heal that abandonment and, that those kinds of childhood moments that just get stuck in our subconscious mind, and they are indicating like how we're acting as adults and we don't even realize it. So that's some stuff that I've been diving into lately.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I was pretty happy, awesome single mom. I was an only child until I was 13. So I talk to myself a lot still. I can play any board game alone, like me versus me. So I have all these like only child things going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a good childhood. I was super into theater and like dancing and acting and a bunch of that, which I later, as I became more and more secure in myself, the urge to perform has really lessened in my life, which is just kind of like interesting side note for me. As I am not so addicted to getting approval, I don't feel the need to do so much performing. So
That's beautiful.
That's still totally just a part of my forever personality. Anyway, when I was 19, I had a very, very challenging year. And that kind of started with, I woke up to a masked man in my bedroom. And I don't think it's necessary to share every detail of that experience. But it was just straight out of Law and Order or worse, or a scary movie, which is why I don't watch scary movies anymore. I feel like I lived one and I do not want to be entertained by that. So, that experience really, really changed the way that I looked at the world. And it's so amazing how in like this very short, brief experience, maybe an hour of my life, I suddenly no longer believed that my home was safe. I no longer believed that men were safe. I didn't believe that God was real, and I had grown up quite religious. I felt just totally betrayed. My entire brain changed. And that's what trauma does. You know, it changes our brain, and being in survival mode in a way where it's like, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, my mom or my little brother, I have a half brother who's 13 years younger than me, and just thinking like, they're going to come home from school and find my body. You know, I thought for sure I was going to die that day. That's how I lost my virginity. I mean, it just shattered like my entire idea of what my life was going to be like, and what, you know, so that was a huge ordeal. Because the person wore a mask, I of course called the police. So after everything happened and I felt like I could eventually leave my house, I ran to the neighbor, we called the cops, went to the hospital, all of that.
Right.
And I think because of not knowing who it was at the time, at least, it took away some of, like, a lot of survivors feel some kind of guilt or think like maybe it was my fault, which it's not. It's never your fault. But I didn't really have to deal with that. And I think that's when pretty quickly I was like, I have to be a voice for those survivors who are not quite ready to share or think that maybe they did something, which they didn't. But that was just something that kind of was an interesting element to that made me feel a little bit more empowered to talk about it. So I very quickly, wanted to start working with STAR and volunteering. Too quickly. I wasn't ready. I was still dealing with a lot. Anyway, so I went through that experience, and we'll go back to that because that type of experience, when you start including the criminal justice system, it becomes a very long, drawn out. I mean, it's 20 years later and it's like still things are coming up. And so it's that as a whole other element of just navigating the criminal justice system as a victim of a violent crime, or sexual assault or anything. So yeah, I could talk for days about that part.
Yeah.
But anyway, a few months after that happened, my stepdad left my mom. I think the stress of everything was just too much for him at that time in his life. And so he left. And so that was like another layer of like, oh my gosh, now I have to console my mom who's heartbroken and help take care of my little brother. And I'm suffering from massive PTSD. And then right after that, I got a call that my biological dad had died. And that was the point. And this was all within like a 9-month period. So I was still super traumatized, and just life kept throwing things, and after hearing about my dad, that was the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to need a break. Like, I wouldn't say I've ever felt suicidal, but it was like, I need to push pause. Like, I'll be right back. But how do I get away from what I'm feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't have any healthy coping skills. I do today, and that's awesome. And I've had to work really hard to figure out what those are. But, our parents have all done the best they could.
Right.
And a lot of them didn't have those resources,
No.
So I did what I now know is really typical for people in a similar position to what I was in. And I reached for anything that could make me feel different, anything that could numb me out, that I could escape the pain I was in. I felt so disgusted just with my own body, with just everything that had gone on around me and to me. And it started with abusing prescription drugs. And that was something like, that was what the medical world, after everything I went through, again, there wasn't really a healthy coping skill thrown at me. It was just a whole pile of prescription drugs.
Right.
It was like, well, this is going to be really hard for you to cope with. So here's some pain pills, some sleeping pills, some antidepressants, some anti-anxiety. So I went from nothing in my system to just everything.
Wow.
And I'm going to say that wasn't super helpful. So I started by abusing those and just going, oh, maybe I can take this early in the day and it'll calm me down. And, that quickly spiraled.
Yeah.
And then I turned 21 and started adding alcohol to that mix. And then, I was like sex or, just really honestly, just about anything. I developed an eating disorder. I had bulimia off and on I had all of these issues off and on for maybe 8 or 9 years through my early 20s, through my 20s, basically.
Right.
And it's just kind of heartbreaking, thinking about that. And especially when I learned how extremely common that is for anyone who's been abused to turn around and abuse themselves, and that's the part that's just like kills me, because it's just, I wish it wasn't like that, and I guess that's why I do what I do today, is that maybe someone else will, instead of do what I did for 9 years, maybe they'll just do it for 1 year.
Yeah.
maybe they'll start, mixing in some other things that are good for them and find those other ways to heal and to change how they feel in a positive way.
Or there really weren't a lot of resources out there for you back then either, right?
Or people.
Or programs or,
What was your relationship like with your mom, if I can ask?
Sure. We were very close. I think because I was an only child and she was a single mom, really close. Almost too close. She's definitely the mom who's like, I want you to be my best friend and my companion, and like wants to talk to me about all the things. And I'm like, Mom, I don't, call your girlfriends. Like, I'm a kid. But we're still extremely close. Like we talk just about every day, and yeah.
Even when you were a teenager and in your like rebellious years, and I don't know. I have a great relationship with my mom now, but back then when all of that stuff, all of the crazy was going on, we were not close. But it sounds like your mom was a healthy figure in your life when you were growing up.
Yes. Yeah. She didn't drink, nothing like that. And yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I guess as a teenager, I probably wasn't as cool as you. I was a theater nerd and like in swing choir and just like doing dorky stuff that I still do. So like unite theater nerds. But it wasn't really until I was like in my 20s and kind of out of the house that I was making a lot of bad choices, and she didn't have to see all of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't under her roof. Also, as a teenager, we had a lot of foster kids, and I was just thinking about this the other day, because I don't think about that period of my life too often, but I think I was kind of flying under the radar a lot as a teenager, because we had a full house. I had a baby brother, and then we had many different foster siblings in and out, teenagers and kids, and a lot of people that needed a lot more attention than I did. And so I think I was kind of on my own in a way through that. I'm like, don't worry about me, like take care of everything else. And I think in one way that was bad, because I think I was also kind of suppressing a lot of needs that I may have had,
Yeah.
But
yeah, and then when you become an adult and you move out, it's all on you. It's your own life,
Yeah. Yes, for better or worse, for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Blaze. So you said, okay, so after the incident happened and you spent those 7, 8 some years numbing and going through all the things that we've all done when we've had trauma. It was the same with me, the drugs, the drinking, the promiscuity, just trying to feel worthy, feel loved, and numb all the pain that never went away. Never figuring out how to get rid of it and how to get rid of the guilt, because like on my end, I felt guilty of being sexually assaulted when I was the few times, always blamed myself. And so I'm just curious. So you said you did that for so many years. And then so what brought you to the point to where you started finding healthier ways to deal with it or look at it? I mean, like, what was the turning point? Did you find a resource? Did you start doing self-help? Or like, what was the turning point, or how did you find that piece?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that about the parts of your journey too. So I was fairly high functioning for most of that. Most of the time I had a day job. I was still doing theater through all those years. I was still very active. And a lot of my using was alone or sneaking little bottles in my purse into the bar so no one knew that I was actually drinking 2 or 3 times as much as everyone I was with, because I would go in the bathroom and like drink in between drinks. It was so much secrecy. And yeah, and even the eating disorder, even though I'm sure people close to me knew, like that also felt like almost like my best friend at times. It was another like secret that I felt like was one of the only, this entity that like knew how much pain I was in and was always there to try to give me some relief, even though that was always a cycle of relief and then guilt and then shame.
Right.
And on again, very similar to the substance use. So I definitely tried a few different things over the years to try to get better. And sometimes it was for somebody else. And turns out that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't, does it?
No, I would hurt a boyfriend's feelings or make my mom nervous. And I'd be like, oh, I'll go to a meeting. Yeah. And so that's how kind of AA or NA, those different, meetings started for me, was my way to basically apologize for bad behavior. And oftentimes I would go to those meetings, hug a bunch of people, act really cheerful, leave and go to the bar because I wasn't ready. It wasn't for me. It was like doing homework and cheating or something, I just was like I was not ready. And I did do a outpatient treatment center at Providence called Breakthrough.
Okay.
And that was really early on too. And I guess I would say I was stupid. I was immature, and I went there thinking I have this one problem with this one specific substance, and that's it. And I just could not be convinced that they're like, no, you're also an alcoholic, you also have this eating disorder, like we don't do the one thing, like that's not a thing. And I just didn't believe it, because at that point in my life I'd never been drunk. I'd never, there's still a lot to be learned. And I think stubborn and ignorant. And so I did not make the most of that experience, although it planted a lot of seeds. And I think that's important, because I don't really love like the term relapse, or this idea that you can be sober or clean for a year and then you have a weekend where you go off the rails and then all of a sudden that's all erased somehow. Like I don't believe that. I mean, I don't want us to relapse because it usually is really painful. But I still fully believe that like the seeds that are planted when we are doing the work, they don't just disappear because a mistake is made. Like that's still there. We still have so much more knowledge and empowering things that we can now more quickly go back to and know exactly where to go now. And I just think it's important for people to know. It's like, I just feel like a lot of shame comes with relapse, and that bothers me. But
I agree.
Big thing that I learned from that was about 12-step meetings. And so when I did eventually get to the point when I was ready, and that was when I got pregnant. And I remember like my boyfriend and he had said, we talked about having a kid. I, went off birth control and then just like instantly got pregnant. And so I remember even looking at the pregnancy stick and like seeing double, because I was still drunk from the night before, and like, whoa, I'm going to have a baby. Whoa, dude. And just, in my mind, I'm just like, oh yeah, sure, let's have a kid. They're funny. I mean, if only I'd known.
So how old were you?
Late 20s.
Late 20s. Okay.
Like 27.
Yeah. Okay.
Or 28. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I had, my whole pregnancy was sober, clean and sober, but I kind of was white knuckling it. And I went to a few meetings, worked some steps here and there, but I also was just a total basket case. as you can imagine, like take away all of my coping skills,
Yeah.
add a bunch of pregnancy hormones.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, my ex-husband is a saint for being so nice through all of that. But what happened was I had my son, and a week later I went out and had a drink to celebrate because I thought I was just sober for 10 months. Clearly I don't have a problem.
Right.
I'm fine now. And I remember taking that drink and just tunnel vision. And I remember right away, I was like, oh, shoot, like I'm not fixed. It's still there. I'm still that person, or still have that brain, that addictive part. So,
Yeah.
and then I quickly got pregnant with my second child after that. And that was when it was like, okay, I actually have to change. And, my partner at the time sat me down and said, like, you can't be around these kids if you ever do this again. Because then I was starting to sneak drinks again and trying to, it was bad.
Yeah.
And it didn't get to the point it had ever gotten before. But now we're talking about babies and, something I had to actually lose that I didn't want to lose. And so the stakes were a lot higher. And so I decided that I was going to commit to doing a 12-step program for 1 year. And I would do whatever these people told me to do. And, if I didn't feel better at the end of a year, I would just go back to what I was doing. And so I chose a women's only meeting because at that time I didn't have any female friends. I really had been using men quite a bit. So I didn't want to be distracted. I wanted to be uncomfortable because I knew my comfort zone was killing me. There was something else about that. Well, I also went in, unlike the cheating Blaze who would walk in and like pretend to be happy and then go drink. I went in like hoodie on my head, arms crossed, pissed off, not talking, crying in the corner. I didn't pretend to be okay. I was really, really scared because I really was going to try to change. And so I knew that my first thought was going to be wrong, whatever it was. And so I just started doing the opposite of my first thought a lot. And I really leaned into the mentors there. And I also quickly noticed that at the meetings, the people who were complaining about the same things every week were not working the steps. They weren't using, but they weren't actively like writing things down and working through things. So I thought, okay, well, I definitely don't want to be complaining about the same things a year from now. So I'm going to commit to working at least one step a month and go from there. So then it was kind of cool because I think that same part of my brain that gets activated and obsessed with negative things can also be obsessed with positive things. And so I started to sort of see that part of me as a superpower, and this one-track mind that took me to bad places could also be really, really powerful in a good way. And so I started being pretty, maybe getting addicted to healing and looking outside of those rooms as well to other things that felt good to me, and podcasts and mentors and books. And like, I love a good workbook because I also notice when I'm writing stuff down, the healing would go a lot faster for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I dove in pretty hard. And September. So 9/22/11 is my sobriety date. So it's been over 11 years now. And of the alcohol, drugs, and the eating disorder, they all kind of had to go at the same time because, again, it was that same secrecy,
Yeah. Wow.
Well, and it's that doing that work on yourself, that the drugs and the alcohol and the eating disorder is all the symptom of what's going on in our head, and all of the fears and the things that we're trying to work through, and all of the everything. So that's pretty dramatic, that's some pretty intense work that you did in that year. And so are you still going to AA, or do you still how have you kind of taken that experience and transformed it into what you do on a regular basis today?
Yeah, good question. So I went super regularly for about 3 years until we started traveling a lot and I wasn't in Anchorage as much. And I just kind of got disconnected from that. And when I came back, it didn't feel the same to me. Like instead of feeling better when I went, I felt a little bit worse. And so I thought, and also by that time I had really brought in a lot of other healing tools for myself and mentors and online courses with people all over the world. And, so I wasn't without any type of practice or program. But yeah, so I sort of faded out of that. And I still think I still recommend it, especially to people in the beginning, because just having that support of a community, I think is really, really important when we are first trying to figure out how to change our lives. And I think there are things in those programs that are going to resonate with people and things that won't. And I don't think that there's just one way for someone to be in recovery. So I'm super glad I did it. And like you're saying, Julia, like doing that work and trying to figure out the root of things, every time I did work to the steps or did these other programs, it's like another layer would release. And it was like that much closer to feeling free, layer by layer of just all the gunk that was just stuck inside me, all the years that I just kept numbing everything I felt, like that all had to come out somehow. And so it's powerful to find all those, even the little ways to just like baby step your way to like out of the pain and start to feel like the light come in again.
All right, everyone, that's all the time we have for today. But again, a huge thank you to Blaze for being a guest of the Redemption podcast. Remember, part 2 of this 2-part series with Blaze is going to be dropping 2 weeks from when today's episode is released. So we're looking forward to seeing you again for part 2. That's it for today's episode. If you or someone you know is a victim of sex trafficking, please call 1-866-733-7878 or text HELP to 233-733. For local services here at my house, you can call 373-HELP. That's 373-HELP. Remember, if you see something, say something. This is Redemption, loved and thriving. Until next time.